Where is the actual stream? Is that? Well, sorry about the turnout and whatnot, but I'm James. I'm the strategy director at a brand and experience design consultancy called Matter of Form, and we've put together this presentation to talk about some of the kind of technological advances that seem to be happening in the world of hospitality, particularly around kind of what's happening not just today, but what's going to kind of be coming in the sort of the near future, and some of the big trends that are kind of affecting that. Like I said, we're a brand experience design consultancy. We're based in London, but we work with businesses all over the world. We've had the fortune of kind of working with some of the best hospitality brands in the world on all sorts of projects, from kind of brand creation to actually creating some of these brands and kind of repositioning them, rethinking about their place in the market and kind of who the target audience is and all of that sort of stuff. And then also we do experience design, so digital design for a lot of these clients as well, whether that be websites, apps, thinking about a variety of kind of touch points, all of that sort of thing. So this will last sort of 30 minutes, maybe a bit quicker, but it's going to kind of cover three parts. There's the sort of the now, so like what's the dominant narrative going on when we talk about technology and talk, generally in 2022. What's next? So what advances can we expect in the sort of the near future? Hey guys, when it comes to technology, and then the future. What's the sort of far away kind of vision here of what's going on? And actually what's going to, in a sort of a bizarre way, we're going to kind of start here and we're going to end there, but it's also going to kind of come back a little bit here as well. So 2022, who here has heard of the words like the metaverse? Has that been a phrase that you've heard of? Yeah. Well, it's like 2022, there's thousands of articles, thought pieces, news reports, all trying to kind of talk about this thing called the metaverse and the incredible kind of impact that it's going to have on everything in the future. And all of those articles, what you'll find is that they all have like the metaverse is ... They're all trying to define something that doesn't really kind of exist yet. But most of these articles and thought pieces, they all settle on the idea that in the future we're going to be inhabiting some sort of like 3D virtual world. We're going to have our homes in there, or second homes, cars, clothing, all of that sort of stuff that we kind of live with. And so all of those people, it's a bit like, well, you know, welcome to like 2003, welcome to 2004, right? Like a lot of that stuff in terms of virtual worlds and the ability to have your own avatar and clothes and all of those things, you know, that's been around for like almost a decade, you know, or 2 decades even. So you've got Second Life here on the right, 2003, World of Warcraft you might have heard of, 2004. All of those allow you to kind of create a character, you know, have a home, live in there to some extent, and kind of live a second life. So why are people kind of talking about this now as if it's something new? And importantly, if this thing is coming in the future, the metaverse, how is it different to kind of what's existed already? Now, there's a sort of quote here that I like around it that tries to explain it, and it's a bit wordy, so I'll kind of break it down. But this is by Matthew Ball, who's a bit of an expert on the metaverse. He's written the kind of the primer on it. He's the ex-global head of strategy for Amazon Studios, so hopefully he knows a little bit about what he's talking about. But this is a kind of a vision of what the metaverse is, right? The metaverse is a massively scaled and interoperable network of real-time rendered virtual worlds, which can be experienced synchronously and persistently by an effectively unlimited number of users with an individual sense of presence and with the continuity of data such as identity, history, entitlements, objects, communications, and payments. Blah. So let's break that down. So massively scaled. So those games that we showed you earlier, like the Second Life and World of Warcraft, you know, they exist on sort of small servers. So there's like thousands of people that are into those games and playing at the same time. You're not playing literally with everyone in the game, you're playing with the people who are on that sort of server. So in the future, these worlds are going to be inhabited by a lot more people who are going to be able to hopefully kind of interact with anyone in those places. The most important thing here, and I'll kind of skip to the end here, is this idea of interoperability. So at the moment, you've got these kind of virtual lives or these virtual worlds that exist in a kind of what they call like a walled garden, right? It's like, it's beautiful, it's great, but you can't take anything from this place into another place. And that's one of the big kind of changes, or big perceived changes in the future, is that you're going to have an individual sense of presence, your own identity, the ability to kind of move between these spaces, and take your identity and the things that you own with you. It's like digital assets, like clothes and these sorts of things, from one space into another. And that's when the idea of kind of having a literal kind of second life, or manifested life in a virtual world, starts to make a little bit of sense. So why is everyone talking about it? Hey guys, don't worry about it. Yeah. So why is everyone talking about it now, and should we be paying attention to it now? So there's sort of a few kind of forces, and I'm getting to the hospitality bit in a second, right? But why are people talking about it now? The pandemic, so you've had more people spending more time in these sorts of worlds, people are paying attention to it more. People spent 40% more time kind of playing video games during that period, which is insane when you think about how much people already spend in these sorts of places. The advent of NFTs. Has everyone heard of like an NFT? So a non-fungible token. So this was one of the success stories of 2022, so this year, where one sold for nearly 70 million. And that's a piece of art, like a digital piece of art that you can go on Google and you can find. You can look at that piece of art on Google Images. The thing that's different about it is that there's a certificate of ownership. So an NFT is literally the ability to own a digital asset, which is something that you haven't been able to do before, right? The idea of owning something that was digital, something that was virtual, there was no kind of way to show who actually owned it because of like copy and paste and all that sort of stuff. So that's where it starts to make sense with like, actually I can have assets that exist in a virtual space, whether that be a car or a house or clothes, whatnot. Rapid rise of VR, so that's going through the roof. It's gone from kind of 5 billion in 2019 to predicted to be 24 billion by the end of 2024. And that's because like PlayStation and Xbox and these sorts of people have also started using that technology for games as well. So that's becoming far more popular. And then on the subject of popularity, kind of pop culture is reinforcing this idea that we're going to be spending more time in virtual spaces, whether that be kind of books and films like Ready Player One, where they live in kind of a virtual world versus dealing with like the realities of the actual world. So like Snoop Dogg creating his own like Snoopverse inside Sandbox, and people doing like concerts in Fortnite, and all of this sort of stuff is creating a kind of energy around this stuff. And it is a little kind of short video here of the sort of some of the potential of this technology, particularly in kind of education. Let's see if this works. Doesn't look like it's going to work. We'll go with it next. So that's all great, right? That's all fantastic. But what does any of that have to do with kind of hospitality? What's the hospitality angle here? I think I came across this sort of idea is that it's basically everything that I've just talked about. It feels like it's the opposite of travel and kind of experiencing life and experiencing like the new cultures and kind of using your sort of senses when you travel, right? So things like taste, one of the ways that we experience new cultures through taste, smell, olfactory senses, touch, hearing and sight. And you can argue that some of these last two, like hearing and sight, you might be able to kind of do with this sort of technology. But the other ones, you're arguably never going to be able to do. And it's sort of like, again, it's the opposite of kind of hospitality. And I found this quote the other day, which I really liked, was, "The hospitality industry is a precious business sector that enriches lives through the visceral joy of travel, food, wine, and culture. We already have planet Earth in our universe, and it's more amazing than we could ever experience fully." I think there's a lot of pushback, particularly in the hospitality space, around some of this technology, because it's so like the opposite of what we're trying to do. And actually, there's sort of some people kind of pushing back in this in quite funny ways. So I'm just going to show you one kind of example of that.
Hi, welcome to this very natural setting. Today, I want to talk about a revolutionary approach on how to connect our world without being super weird. Some said it's not possible. Some said it's out of reach. Now we say it's already here. Seriously, look, it's right here. And what do we call this not so new chapter in human connectivity? The Iceland verse. Enhanced actual without silly-looking headsets. In our open world experience, everything is real. It has been for millions of years.
So yeah, there's kind of a lot of like pushback against this stuff as well, but we'll get to where it suddenly starts to make a little bit more sense towards the kind of end. But let's talk about specifically kind of what's next, what's the sort of technological advances that seem to be kind of in the hospitality space, and kind of why they're significant. So what's next? Again, kind of not that new, and it's called AI or machine learning. And you can go back to examples like the Colossus in World War II, arguably the first kind of computer, Alan Turing's machine, that sort of cracked the Enigma code, right? And all it was doing is pattern recognition, right? It's pattern sorting. So it finds patterns and it suggests solutions to create new, more efficient patterns. Well, that's what kind of machine learning does. So what's the advantage there? Well, we're an industry that's faced with kind of labor shortages and constant kind of issues around staffing. So machine learning is one way where you can look at kind of staff flows, you can look at things more intelligently to see where people might more be sort of effectively placed. Other kind of efficiencies and productivity across supply lines. So particularly when you don't want to keep lots of stock and all of that sort of stuff, on site, there's a lot of kind of real in-time, sort of just-in-time stuff that's enabled through kind of smarter AI. Automated pricing, so no longer kind of just taking a benchmark on what other properties or other people are doing in the area or the seasonality, but actually being able to test and adjust pricing in a very intelligent, real-time manner. And then also, and this last one's kind of interesting, predicting some of the expectations that guests have, particularly ultra high net worths and high net worth guests, before they kind of have it or before they even know it themselves. So once you've got a large enough data set of kind of requests or things that people usually ask for, there's a degree of predictability around it that you can start to create using this stuff. Another quote I really liked around this, because I think oftentimes we think that technology is all about replacing people. And actually I think here what we're talking about is like automating the ordinary. So like the dull, the mechanical parts of the job where people are, arguably doing more sort of robotic tasks anyway. And once you do that, once you automate the ordinary, then staff can really focus their time on delivering really extraordinary experiences. Now, we obviously work with a lot of kind of luxury hospitality clients. And one thing that I sort of have noticed over the years from doing this, if you look at any kind of TripAdvisor sort of review of any really good hospitality offering, of 5-star, one theme is always the same. The things that people comment on as being good, it's always staff. It's always staff by name every single time. And technology can't replace that, and it shouldn't do. Hopefully, it should enable us to have more of those kind of human connections and kind of have those moments with guests that make the experience so special. So when we talk about automating ordinary, what do we mean? So robots are going to be cleaning rooms at some point. Technology is kind of coming. We've obviously all heard of like a Roomba. It's not quite there yet, and Wally's not here yet either. But this sort of technology is coming along. Simpler back office tasks and front office ones have become automated. We'll talk a little bit about digital concierge in a minute. And then automate some sorts of touch points. I appreciate this wouldn't be a kind of luxury sort of hospitality touch point for sure. But certain touch points where things can be automated, where people don't want to have to kind of ring up or call up to have those things done, that's where it can make a difference. And I thought this stat was kind of interesting, in that digital concierges can handle almost 60% of guest interactions today. And for hotels who have limited staff or want to offer a contactless experience to guests, it can be a godsend. So that idea that maybe you want a shirt pressed or you want something cleaned, the fact that you can kind of just do that through a sort of a digital means versus having to kind of ring up the front desk or speak to people, that's going to be sort of more popular in the future. There's also sort of a moral obligation or a kind of moral interesting point here around using technology in a hospitality context. Now, we work a little bit with Juliet Kinsman. She's a sort of sustainability expert, specifically when it comes to hospitality. And this was a kind of point that she made, that people are open to new experiences and new places. We know there are loads of stats on how people, when people are on holiday, they make life-changing decisions. What we're talking about is people coming out of their comfort zone. It's those moments that can create a meaningful shift in mindset. And I think if you've got, business leaders staying in your hotel, you've got people who are in a different frame of mind to their kind of everyday, they're more willing to sort of take things back with them. We can see how sometimes it affects people's diet, for example, like a wellness retreat, these sorts of things can actually shift how people think about stuff. And technology is the same. If we're the sort of front line for some of these changes, you can bet that those people are going to take that back and sort of implement it in their own lives. Obvious ones are like, reducing food waste through smarter inventory, this sort of stuff. We all know kind of how much stuff, hopefully we try not to waste, but does. And then things like sustainability generally. You can't improve any measure of sustainability unless you do measure it, right? Unless you've got the data and you understand kind of how you're performing in order to look at where you can make improvements. And so machine learning and this sort of technology is going to help a lot with kind of understanding what's working well, what's not working well, where kind of improvements can be made. Supply chain efficiency, so taking a bit of perhaps a wider aperture than just food tech, but more just-in-time stuff, so holding less things on property, making sure that it's there when it's needed and not there when it's not. And then lastly, even doing things like intelligently allocating rooms to conserve energy, so that we're not using, we've got these huge buildings and sometimes they're not full. We need to make sure that that kind of the energy is being used in the right way, and again, machine learning can help with some of those things. Does that all broadly make sense? Yeah. So we're going to go to the future now, and we're kind of going to go back to the start when I was talking about all that metaverse stuff, because I think there are some kind of implications on how that stuff will impact hospitality. So Bloomberg reckons that this stuff, the metaverse market size, is going to reach 800 billion by 2024. 800 billion. And this is something that arguably, like I said, doesn't really exist yet in its kind of fullness. But still, that's a staggering kind of figure. So yeah, there's nothing sort of unreal about the metaverse. It's not there yet, but that's what people said about the internet, right? It's like when the internet first started, people didn't really think, it's a bit weird. Why would I do it like that? It's like, really, you're going to have me sitting all day doing this? People wouldn't have thought that. So I think that's how we have to view this sort of technology now. It's through that lens, is that there's no kind of period of history that's so hard to kind of see as the one that you're living in right now. So it is coming. This stuff is going to make a big difference. There's also nothing unreal about crypto or blockchain or these sorts of technologies. They have kind of market cap, and they are changing how some people are paying for things and creating certificates of ownership and this sort of stuff. NFTs, so we talked about kind of that Beeple piece earlier, the $69 million kind of digital piece of art that you can find in Google Images. These things can have value, but not when they are just digital art. This is a phase. This stuff we're going to move beyond this. The important thing about non-fungible tokens is that it's for the first time, again, you can own a digital thing. And that's the real big change there. Now, you've got kind of new types of NFT stuff that are known as kind of utility NFTs. So rather than you just buying a piece of art, what you're really buying into is an exclusive kind of club, right? So if you look at things like Bored Ape Yacht Club, you're not just buying a Bored Ape, you're not just buying a piece of art. You're kind of buying into an exclusive group of members, with sort of all of these kind of perks. They don't have physical spaces yet. They will do. These things have gone for millions. It's they're going to use that to create other experiences for people who are in that club. And probably there'll be further kind of drops and mintings for people who want to get a bit closer to it. So that's kind of the future of loyalty. It's probably the future of membership. So rather than you just having a plastic card, you'll have like a digital key almost. That's a signature of you kind of being part of something. This is one thing that we created for a client in the Middle East, which is basically the idea was, as you're building a home, so people are building their sort of family palace in the desert, we would ingest a lot of information about that plot, the plot of land itself, the time that the ground was first broken, the family name, the coordinates of it, ingest all of that information and use it to create a unique digital key or a unique digital signature for each home. So every palace in this region has its own unique kind of digital key. There's a signature of you being part of that community. And you're going to see more and more of these types of uses for things. That then becomes your kind of key into the whole experience. It opens doors, literally. So that's kind of where some of this stuff is going. In terms of our take on the metaverse specifically and that kind of technology, yeah, I think a lot of this is probably perhaps for the next generation versus us in this room right now. But it is coming and it is going to change things. There's a lot of get rich quick schemes for sure, and the risk of doing something really gimmicky is high. So I don't know, did you guys hear the story about the guy who bought the first tweet? So yeah, you're nodding, yeah. So this guy, right, not Jack. Jack was the guy who made the first tweet, but someone bought the first tweet as an NFT, and somebody going, oh wow, yeah, I'm going to own a key piece of like digital culture here, you know, great. He bought it for $2 million, and about 3 months later, he decided to put it up for charity auction, and the top bid was $12,000. Ouch. There's like a lot of mistakes to be made here. And things only have value if people perceive it to have value, because there's no material value to any of this stuff. I think value lies in how these sorts of technologies, whether it's mixed reality, full virtual, are going to kind of hopefully upgrade, elevate, and enrich some real life experiences. And that's where I think, as people who work in hospitality, where we're trying to create incredible experiences for our clients, this stuff might then form some of the experiences that we create, not all. But I mean, look here, you know, you're trying to figure out your way around a city. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a cute little fox kind of showing you around Geneva? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's a bit of a gimmick. But there are these sorts of applications that suddenly start to turn things that can be quite dull or ordinary into kind of more enriching, interesting cultural experiences. With all of this, and we kind of spoke a little bit about personnel earlier and kind of staff, it's about complementing, not replacing. So this sort of technology isn't there to replace what we do, it's there as a sort of a complement to it. So what can we imagine kind of coming very, very swiftly? So we're gonna go past just the image gallery, and you go on like someone's website, flipping through kind of, let's look at the rooms and see if they're nice. We're gonna get to a point where if we're selling residences or you know, there'll be virtual sort of walkthroughs. You'll be able to kind of walk through the space and experience it. You'll be able to see kind of perhaps the room that you're going to stay in or an example of it. You may be able to walk through the lobby and feel the kind of the vibe and energy of the place. And I think even with these, you can think of these quite functionally, like, oh wow, it's just a virtual kind of layout of the room, which is good for getting an understanding of size and space and what's in there and maybe the view and this sort of stuff. But isn't it kind of, I think it's a bit of a missed opportunity for brands who perhaps want to create an experience in that moment as well. I would imagine that the likes of like Amman or Belmont wouldn't just show you a room in a virtual space. They would do something interesting in that room that would be kind of culturally sensitive, attached to their brand, created an actual experience in its own right. And that's when those digital touch points start to kind of be imbued with some of the amazing things that we do as hoteliers and those who work in hospitality. Event travel. So obviously it's nice to come today and try all the roast beef and gravlax and stuff. But yeah, there were some people that couldn't make it today, right? And we're sort of live streaming this now. There will be mixed media formats of doing that. At the moment, it's very much like I sit behind my screen and I kind of watch what's going on here. But imagine if I could also interact with other people who couldn't make it to the venue in some sort of interesting way. Maybe there was a discussion going on at the same time. And the space itself can even mirror the fantastic setting that we have today. Holidays, I don't think, I really can't see a world where we're all going on virtual holidays. But I think virtual experiences in places that we can't have access to or that we don't want to get like a 24-hour flight to reach, particularly for people who perhaps don't have that level of mobility but still want to experience another culture, another place. This sort of technology would allow you to kind of, you know, spend a morning in Sydney looking at the Opera House, you know, getting a sense of the culture there, and spending the afternoon in the Seychelles, perhaps relaxing on a beach or toasting a cocktail with a friend who's there that you can make to see in time. I think that's where a lot of like event-based stuff is going to go. So obviously today there's been kind of mixed, so we're streaming and we're also kind of doing things live. Now in the future, when you've got stadiums or you've got, you know, even hotels that are full to the rafters and you can't fill any more rooms, there's no more keys. You know, how do you continue to create revenue? How do you continue to create kind of opportunities there? Well, there will be, particularly with things like sporting events and stuff like this, you know, not an empty seat, literally, but like an always empty seat that you can kind of access through this sort of technology. And there are incredible things that you can do, I think even at the moment in the world of kind of basketball, where you don't have to just sit there on the sideline and kind of observe a match like you would in real life. You can actually like go through the court, you can look at it from different angles. Suddenly the game becomes an even more kind of dynamic, interesting thing to view. So this stuff, whilst I always think that the real thing will have like a premium attached to it, because of atmosphere and being able to say, I went there, I experienced it, I think that will always kind of have a premium. But there will be other benefits to doing things virtually as well. Shopping the room.